Hi, welcome back to Bedtime Stories with Danyah and Guests. Oh, it's lovely to see you again and to welcome all those new people, all those new friends that we haven't seen before. Thank you for coming to snuggle up for a bedtime story. And for those of you who've watched before, you'll know that last Thursday, Sophie gave her riddle. And the answer to that riddle is a fart. Now, nobody got that answer, a fart. However, we did get some people who said a sneeze or a burp, and I think they're probably just as good answers. And Sophie will give you another riddle at the end of this story. So, if you're ready, snuggle up, snuggle down. Are you ready, Barclay? And I'll tell you the story. Have you ever had a really rumbly tummy before lunch or before supper when you're really, really hungry? Well, it happened that in this particular village, there were lots and lots of children with rumbling tummies. They were really, really starving. And so were their parents and their grandparents, their aunts and their uncles, and all of their neighbours. You see, there had been a lot of wind, a lot of rain and a lot of sun, but they were all in an order that wasn't really very good for the food, for the vegetables, for the plants, for the animals. So a lot of the animals and the plants had died, leaving this village with very little food. It was a time when there was also fighting in the land. And sometimes when there's fighting, when there's troubles, those villages and communities, they come together. But sometimes people begin to withdraw and go back into their own families, into their own homes, and don't come together and share. And in this village, it was like that. Everybody shut their doors, hunkered down to look after themselves. The children were bored. They wanted to do something, but they had to stay inside. And they looked out of their windows. A few of them did. Oliver, William, Henry, Eliza, Bethany, Ella. And they were looking out of their various windows when they saw an old woman with grey hair and a big long cape. It was a red velvet cape. And she walked towards their village green. Now, the village green was right in the centre of where all of those houses circled. And the village green had seen many, many feast days and festival days. There had been great parties on that common, although those young children, Oliver, William, Henry, Eliza, Bethany, Ella, they'd never seen those parties. They'd only heard of them on whispers. In the middle of the village green, there was an enormous cauldron. And underneath that, so legend had it, a fire had been built on very many occasions, and everyone had gathered together and feasted. And just on the outer edge of the common, there was a deep, deep well. You see, this village was one of the highest villages in the whole country, and the well was deep. The old woman stopped when she came to the cauldron. Everyone thought she'd just passed through. There weren't many visitors these days, so the children were intrigued, and they watched, and they saw as she got something out of her cloak and began to wipe round the cauldron that hadn't been used for years. And then, bit by bit, minute by minute, hour by hour, she started to fill up the cauldron with water from the well. Wow, you can imagine the children were really intrigued, and some of their parents came too. They began to look and see what was happening, although most of them stayed behind closed doors and curtains. The old woman lit a fire, and out of her cape, rummaging, she brought out a big round stone. Some of the children were so intrigued that they ran out and called to her. "What are you doing? What are you doing?" said Dexter. "Ah," said the old woman, "I'm going to make myself a little bit of stone soup." "Stone soup," said Dexter. "There's no such thing." "Oh, have you never had stone soup?" asked the woman. And with that, she popped the stone into the boiling water. Well, Dexter was joined by Poppy and Giselle, Bobby and Stanley, and they all came running and looked round. And they looked at each other. Dexter said, "She's making stone soup. She's a bit weird." "Have you never had stone soup, none of you? Well, I tell you what, the best stone soup I've ever had. It had a little bit of onion in it. I wonder if there's any onion here." Well, it was Eliza who'd come out, and she remembered that in her mum's pantry there was a little onion, and her mum had been keeping it, saving it until she had some other vegetables. So Eliza went off, and she got the onion. "Is this any good?" she said. "Aye, that's a beauty," said the old woman. "Would you mind?" "No," said Eliza. "Come on then, you help me. Chop, chop, choppity chop. Chop off the bottom and chop off the top, the bit in the middle. Let's pop in the pot." Oh, Eliza was so excited. And then there was a big, big gathering of all of the children. They all started to come round. And look, it was very odd. And the old woman began to stir the stone soup. And she was telling stories and singing songs. "Do you know, I've just remembered that actually the very best stone soup I ever ate had some carrot in it." Henry remembered that round in their little garden there were some carrots growing. And he ran off to get those and came back. "How about these?" "Yes, lad," she said. "Come on, come and help me. Can you help me? Chop, chop, choppity chop. Chop off the bottom and chop off the top, the bit in the middle. Let's pop in the pot." As time went on and she sang and she told stories, more and more children gathered. And she was so thrilled to see them. And there were an adult or two came. Sada and Jamie, Kev and Rose, they were all really intrigued. Aye, but you know, I remember that a good stone soup probably has a tatty or two. Honor and Joey said that they knew exactly where to get a potato, and they ran round the corner to one of the allotments, and there Anne had been growing a few vegetables. "Can we have one of your potatoes?" said Honor and Joey. "Go on then," said Anne, and she gave them quite a big potato. They ran back. "Come on, chop, chop, choppity chop, chop off the bottom and chop off the top. The bit in the middle, let's pop in the pot." Well, so it was. They had leeks. They had, what else did they have? Ooh, celery. They had courgettes. All tiny little plants, little bits left over from here and there. Sada had even been out picking some wild garlic. Into the pot. Chop, chop, choppity chop. Chop off the bottom and chop off the top, the bit in the middle. Let's pop in the pot. Philip and Peter and Paul, Sarah and Fiona, they all came and gathered around. Nearly all the village was there by now. It was smelling rather delicious. "The only thing I think's missing," said the old woman as she had a little taste, "is a little pinch of salt. I wonder if there's any salt." Well, Susan and John, they said that down at the bottom of the hill, at the outside edge of the village, there was a strange old guy, Brian. And Brian had a big slab of salt, They wondered whether he would share a bit. "Well, why don't you go and find out?" And off Susan and John and a whole load of their friends. They ran as fast as they could down the hill. And Luca and Hugo said, "Wait for us, wait for us." Down the hill they knocked on the door of the strange man who never really came out, ever. "What do you want?" said Brian. And they told him, and they spoke so fast you could hardly understand them. "Oh, go on," said Brian. "You can have some." And they took some salt. They told him all about the strange old woman, and they ran back up the hill, and they just heard Brian putting on his hat, closing the door, and coming up slowly with his walking stick behind them. He was intrigued. The salt went in. She'd already told everybody to go and get bowls and spoons. And in a twinkling of the eye, she was ready to ladle out the soup. She ladled out a great big full bowlful for everybody. "Hang on a minute," she said. "Before you eat, look to your left. Look to your right. Has your neighbour got food?" Yes, every neighbour had got food. "Well then, blessings on the blossom, blessings on the fruit, blessings on the leaves and stems, and blessings on the root, and a blessing on this food." And they began to eat, some of them just very, very gently, sip by sip, savouring all of it. Some of them scooped it down as fast as they possibly could. Oh, it was so delicious. It was lovely. And then they had seconds. And they chatted and they laughed and they sang. Oh, they had never remembered such a festival and feast day. It was the best day they could remember for a long time. And by now the cauldron was empty. And the old woman lifted out her big, round, smooth stone. She wiped it on her velvet cloak and put it back into one of those deep pockets. "What are you doing?" said Charlotte and Heidi and Nicole. "Well, I'm putting my stone away because I'm on my way now." "Oh, please don't go," they said. "Please stay." "Well, I would stay. It's lovely to see you all. But do you know what? I think there's a village just down the road from here who could benefit from a little bit of stone soup." She winked. She pulled her cloak around her and she walked away. And mostly people didn't notice because they were all so happy to be together and to enjoy each other's stories. I hope you've enjoyed the story. I think Sophie has a riddle for us. Is that right, Sophie?
Yeah, I do. The riddle for this week is...
Yes.
What is the only water you can carry in a sieve?
What is the only water that you can carry in a sieve? I wonder if you can tell us what it is. If you can, please share it with us on Facebook. Get your parents to put it on Facebook or social media. And on Thursday, when Sophie and I are going to share our spontaneous story, we'll tell you the answer. But you might know it already. And now, night-night. Good night.